Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today's subject is all about the UK's advanced rider training body known as IAM Roadsmart, who have taken to produce their own in-house publications for the purpose of teaching courses which they state are approved by the DVSA, which indeed they are not. For those who are new to the channel, then welcome and stay tuned to the end of this video, as that's where it always makes most sense. And not forget to view some of my other videos, as often they are interlinked with each other and cover lots of rider training thought-provoking information. So let's get to it. Just what is the Associate Logbook? Well, this book was produced by Richard Gladman, who was an ex-police sergeant from traffic some years ago. He was given the task of taking information from the long-established Roadcraft, the Police Rider's Handbook. This publication has been the stable platform which the internal police riders used in the past and present for training. And at one point it was decided to let this publication to be made available to the public, and the IM began to offer and train riders to what was seen back then as an advanced rider level. The public, of course, were not being trained to police standards and never have been, due to the blue light sections of the publication, which is still there for you to read. But for myself, over 20 years ago, having found a copy of the Roadcraft, which I read and took on board the information, I applied to take the IM Advanced Test and passed it, and also took the ROSPA test, and I passed that with a gold certificate award. And then wind the clock forward some 20 years, I decided to be part of the newly rebadged IM Roadsmart, which is quite funny for me, because back in 2002 I was running my own motorcycle training group called Smart Riders, and that was an acronym for the study of motorcycle advanced rider training. I trained around 20 riders and they went through and passed their IM test without me being an official IM observer. Just a few years ago, at the back end of COVID, I decided to re-engage with the IM and retook my test for interest purposes and achieved the first, but it didn't feel right. I requested to become a local volunteer within my local group, and having completed that internal course, please go and see that video. It's an absolute hoot, and I'm not talking about a bundle of fun, I'm talking about the chaos that was. And it was here where I was able to focus upon this publication, the Associate Logbook, written by Richard Gladman, and I realised that it was wrong. So I decided to put pen to paper in a contribution to support the IM further. And I wrote a 6,000 word analysis of the Associate Logbook and sent it to the IAM. So here's the document and here's the opening statement. I have taken the time to read all the IMI and LOPS training standards along with the Associate Logbook in an attempt to understand what I need to learn, which standards to achieve to enable me to train associates to the required level. Now this was during my local observer course. During this study I have found the course material to be inconsistent, grey in some areas, limited in information and muddled with ineffective pictures and some diagrams. Having said this, I understand what the IM are trying to achieve, and after 37 years, and this was written in 2020, I simply feel there's not enough meat on the bones to give the associate the best, easiest way to understand. Some of the points which I have listed are a balance of personal experience and additional readings from many sources, endless conversations with other riders, and also instructional videos. It is my intention to be part of IM structure and certainly to assist and give back to other riders where possible. I believe in the principle of the IM, but I would love the opportunity to assist in any way I can, now or in the future. And I then go on to display 11 pages of my analysis of the Associate Logbook. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to read all 11 pages, that would take forever, but what I will do is hit on the main points and highlight some of the areas of concern as I go through. Feel free to read those pages yourself, or indeed request copies from the comments section below. And they passed it on to the author, Richard Gladman, who promptly called me by telephone to discuss my paper. And over this telephone call, he stated that he became defensive when reading what I had written, and actually confessed that he didn't get all the way through it because he wanted to call me first and put me back in my seat. So let's take a look at what I did write and see what made the publication's author and master's course lead feel defensive. But bear in mind, he's an ex-police sergeant, and when the police speak to a member of the public who becomes themselves defensive, it's normally said to raise the suspicion of the police officer that something is being hidden. Right, moving along, let's find out what's been hidden by the author Richard Gladman in the Associate Logbook. Starting here on page 3, after some blah 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 intro waffle, we get to paragraph 4, where it's declared, as an advanced rider receiving training, you will be raising your standards to a satisfactory level. This standard is barely above license acquisition, and it's no better than the enhanced rider scheme offered by ROSPA, although ROSPA is cheaper and you do get a certified certificate recognised by the DVSA. All examiners are briefed to go easy on riders during testing. That's what I've been told. So if you don't break the law or fall off, the chances are you've passed your advanced rider test. And also in this paragraph they state that you're not just here to pass a test. As far as the DVSA is concerned, there is no test, and if riders are excited about receiving a certificate at this time of your life, well, what can I say? At paragraph 6 is where the out-of-date IM staff declare that you have just wasted all your hard-earned money on buying a modern, sophisticated, technologically advanced motorcycle, which is probably smarter than you and me. And they state not to trust the onboard technology, but use it as your guardian angel, because you'll be riding so slow applying IPSCA that you're never likely to need it. And this section also hints that riders might have personalities. Oh my god, that is the only true thing that's in this book. Steady on, guys. And now we can jump into the book complete, right? Human factors, here we go. This is basically an area of psychology which is skipped across, but police officers are well versed at using psychology to achieve their mission. Yet the greater majority of local volunteers are civilians, and they don't think this way or have the need to take advantage of people in situations using psychology. Within page 9 there are many false and contradictory statements. Can you spot them? And if so, please leave your comments below. Page 10, it dares to discuss the motorcycle itself and suggests that riders are to know the performance and safety features of their motorcycle and have the ability to explain them to your local observer. Good luck with that one. This is just a waffle sentence which is never explored by any local observer, because quite often the local observers don't understand their own motorcycle in detail. My own ex-group leader once asked me, how do I check the oil on my motorcycle, which I'd had for 4 years? But if he had gotten to know me and asked a little of my background, he would have understood that I have a wealth of teacher training and examining experience of motor vehicles and motor vehicle technology, and that asking me this question would be a bit like asking the Pope, does he know how to open a Bible? My ex-group leader simply doesn't understand these things and demonstrated that he is a mere robot. On page 11, there's a laughable statement which says, to understand the purpose and conclusion of a moving brake test and to decipher what is an untoward noise. Many riders don't know how their brake calipers are constructed or work, let alone when it doesn't work, and especially what an untoward noise may or may not be. It's simply more IAM piffle coming down from Richard Gladman. At my own point 6, the journey I wrote, the IM need to take the lead in this area and make statements about the real responsibility of decision making prior to a ride, rather than the ones that are listed in the book. The IM are relying on personality types to suit the IM badging, rather than the reality of potential associates' mental focus on such an important subject. And we can now jump to page 13, beyond the wider world waffle and onto IPSCA. This is the acronym which the IM have made all their money from. And yet under my paragraph 8 alpha, I comment that some observers demonstrated that they cannot explain parts of IPSCA coherently, and always refer to reading the book, which shows me a lack of true understanding and a lack of knowledge of the subject, but yet they are a certified local observer. And these are the likely areas where Richard Gladman became defensive. Don't be defensive, Richard. Just understand the points I've made and do something about it. It's called learning and not being arrogant. At paragraph Delta, I highlight about the IM's look all around statement. Look all around where, I ask? There are too many weak-willed statements made by the IM's publications with no backbone or commitments to support them. On page 15 we turn to information under my paragraph 8 echo. Use information. I highlight. This is a massive subject which Richard's book simply glosses over due to not caring about real safety. And during paragraph 6 it does state to prioritise hazards and deal with the most important first. This is totally subjective to individuals' characters. Go and see my other video all about that. And I mention it during paragraph 8 hotel of this letter. And now we arrive at page 16, safety bubbles, one of my favourite subjects. With one solitary statement from the IM at the bottom in the blue box, simply stating that the bubble needs to be varied to prioritise hazards. Please refer to the above paragraph. And also watch my other video all about safety bubbles and how to create one and why we create one. The IM state their local observers are experts with passion. How do they become experts using the minimal information from this publication? I found no experts in my IM group, just arrogant, subservient men who genuinely believed they know more than others. And I received many comments from other riders who've experienced this attitude within the IM. It needs to change. And now the book jumps into the 6 competencies framed by IPSCA. The first mistake is in thinking that IPSCA is all inclusive and available for every situation when simply it is not. IPSCA is far too rigid in its structure, is far too labour intensive and on occasion leads to data overload, which leads to distractions and accidents of advanced riders. Rapid Rider Training Group themselves, who are all ex-Class 1 police riders, make their own statement about the use of IPSCA in that it's basic and for beginners. If it's basic, then why do the IM insist to call their courses advanced? This is stretching of the meaning of that word. All riding must be of a proactive nature and organic to each and every rotation of your wheels. This is where IPSCA fails its own test. Throughout most associate training, there's not enough demonstrations given by any observers due to the observers not being up to the standard required and not being monitored for their own riding ability over time from the IM. No one likes a lecture, but certainly a picture paints 1,000 words. During my own paragraph 10, there are many points highlighted for you to read, but during position under section 10 India and Juliet, it is mentioned that observers are to give an explanation about counter-steering. I asked the observers in my group in front of the group leader to do so, and not one could manage or indeed wanted to try. The group leader remained silent. Shameful. Highlighted, I state that to countersteer is the most fundamental skill which successfully aids the art of cornering. The IM is simply putting IPSCA handcuffs onto riders in a bid to bimble their way through a bend as opposed to the rider riding the bend. I also asked the whole group about at what point do they physically turn or countersteer into a bend. 2 years later, I'm still waiting for them to work it out. The remaining points of 10 kilo through to Quebec are quite clear to understand, so I will leave you to read them in your own time. Under my paragraph 11 alpha, I refer to the limitations of grip statement, which is made here on page 26 of the associate logbook. Where is the observer's information to state the facts of this statement? A single sentence in their hints and tips section simply isn't enough. Tyre grip trade-off is a massive subject, and once again glossed over by the IM because they don't know themselves. No wonder IM riders are still having accidents. On page 27, it identifies just how little thought went into the picture selection. This camera person was obviously standing on the wrong side of the road when these pictures were taken and falls far short of any standards that the IM should attest to. On page 29 is the famous statement that a rider should always be able to stop in a distance that they can see to be clear on their side of the road. Take a look at Reg Local's assessment of username Kate and see how many times she literally barrels into bends ignoring that rule, and at no point would she be able to stop safely on her side of the road in the distance she could see to be clear, and Reg Local passed her with a first. Now look at the picture at the bottom of this page here and ask, what has that picture got to do with anything that's just been discussed? There are many useless pictures are used throughout simply to fill in the embarrassing spaces which the author couldn't think to put something more useful in its place. And this technique is repeated quite shamefully throughout. I will now jump to my paragraph 16 alpha and the associate logbook on page 32. This is so short a subject that it's laughable. The UK roundabouts have to be by far the most complicated, dangerous junctions that any rider can think to negotiate, and yet a mere 2 pages of written words are given to this massive subject. And this continues to identify that the author obviously had better things to do. I write from paragraph 16 alpha to hotel about this, so please rewind, pause and read that page in its entirety before you progress. And if that wasn't bad enough, we have arrived here at paragraph 17, the subject of overtaking. This is yet another area where all associate riders are quite incompetent due to their observers never demonstrating, even by the use of a video. This is a shameful, once more, neglect from the IM training standards, and an area where associates under test conditions feel under pressure to overtake in fear of failing, when indeed there is no standard within the test criteria that states an overtake must be achieved. You can be asked verbally to explain the process. Too many examiners, in my opinion, think they are back at the training depot when testing associates. This must stop. But please read all my comments about this overtaking section once more if you value your own safety. So finally we get into the section of handouts where it talks about filtering, and it begins to give you targets of numbers, speeds that you can achieve 10 to 15 miles an hour faster than the traffic moving up to 20 miles an hour. There should never be targets. It discusses how a motorcycle steers, and yet there's very little information to support this. It does talk about having your forearms near to 90 degrees throughout the action of cornering. Try that on an adventure bike. And pre-rider checks where it mentions a number of acronyms for you to work your way through, and yet the final acronym, Y, is yourself. Surely if you know yourself is not up to the task, then there's no need to conduct any of the previous acronyms. And human factors, where it talks about personalities and how it affects your ride. This is a subject that the IAM know nothing about whatsoever. There's a brief mention for core riding about OAP, where I state I believe the IM observer must lead more, be direct with associates, set the standards, always, and most certainly put the flesh onto the bones of the IM Roadsmart Associate Logbook, which I do not believe all or many observers do. Many points of this final hints and tips section are simply skipped across like a pebble skipping across a pond. In conclusion, it is my personal opinion that associates who join the IM with the sole target of achieving an IAM Roadsmart Advanced Rider Pass certificate are simply short-sighted and selling themselves short. I believe that all good observers should be directed to advise and encourage any rider to consider continuation of their training to achieve their best possible standard of safety and not merely a satisfactory 2. Training to pass, I feel, is underselling what the IAM's backbone should be about. I also feel that the acronym of CEL is not evident, and this is to train with safety, which increases enjoyment, which assists in learning. And CEL should be in the forefront of all observers' minds. The focus on training any associate should be all about the associate. I also feel that the more focus should be placed with each observer to understand at least to a basic level about people's personality types and not simply to gloss over the subject due to lack of understanding. And it's fair to say this has been a longer video than normal and it's quite technical and quite laborious to get through, but I felt it needed to be done. And I haven't even got started on the spelling mistakes, the lack of punctuation and unbalanced grammar. I mentioned briefly some of the pictures that were quite worthless and incorrectly used. But please read the book yourself and read it in more detail and see it for the wishy-washy publication that it really is. So where does the finger of point blame? It points directly at Richard Gladman. He is the author of that publication, but equally, where are his proofreaders? They are all members of the IM staff, and they either don't know what they're reading or they don't care enough. That publication has been produced poorly, and it's unfair for the volunteer associates and observers to use that publication in a bid to pass their tests that they're paying £225 for. I think the IM could do better. What do you think? Please leave your comments in the sections below. And always remember, think safe, ride safe, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye for now.